Just hoping you're all well. I'm a little hoarse, as you can see, but otherwise we're all well and can't wait to see you personally. Rav Henke Zechaynu Levracha is quoted as saying that the Shulchan Aruch is a product of Golus. You look at Shulchan Aruch, all the various shilas, it's Yiddish Golus, Yiddish Tzaris. I guess today's sugya in a certain sense really is a timeless sugya. It's negay all the time. But I think especially now that we have this situation that we're in, and there are many minyanim that are being held outside, or other types of minyanim, and the Sefer Torah is in Golus, and people have been asking questions about where to keep the Sefer Torah, the proper kavod for the Sefer Torah. Are you allowed to stand with your back towards the Sefer Torah? And many other questions that are really part of the sugya of the proper kavod for the Sefer Torah. So let's learn the sugya. It's a beautiful sugya. The Shulchan Aruch begins Yeridei Siman Reish Pei Beis with a quote of the Rambam. And usually you have to find a good Hakdama to a shir. But this quote, this halacha, is a perfect Hakdama, ready-made Hakdama. Chayiv Adam Linoig Kavod Gadol b'Sefer Torah. Now, the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, there are no superlatives. You don't find big mitzvahs, small mitzvahs, but here the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, makes a point of saying you have to have Kavod Gadol. U'mitzvah liyachad leimakom, we'll soon see the halachic implication of that. You have to have a special place for it. U'lechabed hamakam ahu, and you have to honor the place. And as if this is all not enough, lahadroi biyoisa, you have to show extra special kavod for the place. If you look in the Goyin, in his biur, he has a few sources for this, but primarily it's the Mishnah Avos Perek Daled, Mishnah Vav, Kol Mechaber Es HaTorah, Gufay Mechubed Al Abriyas. Chas v'shalom Kol Mechalel Es HaTorah, Gufay Mechul Al Abriyas. Then the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam, after the do's, mentions a few don'ts. Lo Yora Keneged, don't spit. Lo Yigala Ervasai. Well, soon, it's an important mashal to mention. If you have a Sefer Torah at home, in the dining room, you keep it in a nice place, but you can't dress a child or diaper a child. That might be a violation of this Issa, which is rare to have in a shul, but it's negay at home. And then the next halacha, la yifshait raguloi kenegdoi. And the Goyin points to a Gemara in Ksubis. Now, today in modern Hebrew, Pshitas Regel is bankruptcy. There's no shaykhs to a Sefer Torah. But the literal taich of la yivshay ragloi means don't stretch your feet, don't straighten out, in other words, like I say in America, don't chill in front of the Sefer Torah. But what's very important for us, the Goyin mentions the Gemara Kedusha Lamed Gimel, which as we'll see is a key yesod of today. The Gemara has a shayla. Are you mechuyev to stand up for a Sefer Torah? So the Gemara, it's a kal v'chayma. Maduch you mechuyev to stand up for a Talmud Chacham. Kol shkein mipaneh, you have to stand up for a Sefer Torah. Now that's a sugya that we learned once before. That's a whole different shir. But the attitude that the Gemara expresses, if you have to mechabed a Talmud Chacham, kal v'chayma, certainly you have to be mechabed the Torah itself. And this attitude pervades our sugya. And that led the Poskim to say, Rav Moshe says this in Chelik Lamed Ches, the Eimik Bracha says it in Amud Kuf Mem Beis, that standing up for a Sefer Torah, whether when they're moving the Sefer Torah, when they're making Hagba, is actually a Chi of Deraisa. Why? Because there's no doubt about it, standing up for Talmud Chacham is a Mitzvah Deraisa, Mipnei Sefer Takum. So if the Gemara says Torah is more of a chiyuv than a Talmud Chacham, there's a chiyuv deraisa to stand up for a Talmud Chacham. Okay, others say it's only midrabanan, but definitely there's a chiyuv gamat to stand up for a Sefer Torah. But again, what we see, the attitude is important. Chiyuv, kavod, Sefer Torah is more than kavod Talmud Chacham. And this led the Pri Megadim in the Psicha to Kufnun Gimel, the Mishpsei Zahav, Kedusha Sefer Torah. The dues, like we said, and the Issa of Bezoyin Sefer Torah, min ha-Torah, is a din deraisa. The Aleph, mi kal v'chayim, but the Gemara learns it out in Kedusha, v'm kal v'chayim. The kal v'chayim gamorhu. Now this gives us an added sense of urgency to our sugya. You can't play around. You have to give the kavod, that's a mitzvah deraisa. The bezayin, if chalila we do a bezayin, that's also a deraisa. Just like with the Talmud Chacham. This, of course, explains why the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam are so careful. You have to give a kavod gadol, lahadrei b'yoisa. The Shulchan Aruch adds a few more words, which is the yesod of today. V'lo yachza achayrav, don't turn your back to the Sefer Torah. Ela imken gevaya mimenu asara tvachim. Turning your back towards the Sefer Torah is a act of disrespect. I mean, we know this when we go to visit a gadol, a rashiva, a rebbe. So you walk out, you don't turn your back and walk out, you back out. So the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch is saying, you can't turn your back to the Sefer Torah. Ela yeshev lefanav b'kovid reish uvayira ufachad. You have to have a yira and pachad for a Sefer Torah. And then the Mechaber adds, again, all the lashon of the Rambam, Shahu, the Sefer Torah, Eid HaNeman, this is the eternal witness, the eternal testimony, Al Kol Boy Oilam. This is for all of generations, the eternal symbol of truth. That explains why you have to be careful with Kovid Roish, you have to have Yira and Pachad. But then the Shulchan Aruch adds, V'yichabdenu kafi koichai. You have to have Kovid for the Sefer Torah as much as you can. You know, we touch the fi koichai means do the best you, try the best you can. That means nothing. I'll try my best means nothing. But do as much as you can. If you'll ask why this overwhelming obligation to respect the Torah, I think it's those words, Ha'ed Haneman Al Kol Boy Oilam. I always think the pshat is, you think about since the Torah was given, how many millions and billions of mitzvahs were done. Many of them with Mesiras Nefesh, Domim Tarti Mashma, the Yidden, the show devotion, the Boy Ba'esh, Uvamayim Al Kiddush Shmecha. Why? Why does he do a mitzvah? There's no police, there's no Gestapo forcing him, there's no CIA. You know what the answer is? In the Torah HaKadoshah. The Torah is the eternal witness of the ultimate truth. I heard this from Rav Shimon Schwab, he once said that Rabbi Yerucham once picked up a chumash and turned to Talmid and says, tell me, is there any book in the world that every word and every nuance of it is as true as this book? Of course, referring to the chumash. That's the Eid HaNeman Al Kol B'Yei Olam. But what's even more striking, there seems to be a different source for our sugya. The Yerushalmi in Saita, Perikei, at the end of Halachic, it's also in Brachas Tes Hey, wonders about an obvious question. What does it mean, Es Hashem Olikecha Tira? It seems like it's implying there's something else besides Kavod Hashem. What else is that including when it's Hashem Olikecha Tira? So the Emes says, you probably remember the Gemara in Pesachim, Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis. The Gemara says, he said, every S is a tuffle. Until he came to Es Hashem Olikecha Tira, nothing is secondary to Torah, to the Bnei Shloim. So the Shalmi also had that question. What does it mean Hashem Olikecha Tira? Zakti Shalmi, Oisai ve'es Teirasai. You know what's subordinate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? You know what justifies saying Es Hashem Olikecha Tira l'Rabbis Kavod HaTorah? You look in the Shiarei Korban, the back of the Yishalmi, he says L'yira mi'aTorah atzmai loka mipaneha u'chedayim alai. Mavel harayin. Kavod Sefer Torah is put in the same pasuk like Kavod Hashem. Amalei kasav yef shelo oimai. But the kavod for the Sefer Torah is one and the same for the kavod of a Borei Olam. We have to see in the Sefer Torah the Rebbeinu Shalom. You have to see the Noisen HaTorah in the Torah. You have to see the Anah Nafshi Kosibis Yehovas. And that's why there's such an overwhelming obligation of respecting the Torah. Lahadrei biyoisa, kavod gadol. And I'd like to add, there's a well-known halacha in Shulchan Aruch, the beginning of Kuf Mem Tes, Yif Aleph, which is based on the Gemara in Soita Lamed Tes Amud Beis, that when the Sefer Torah is being brought to the bima, you're supposed to follow it, you're supposed to escort it. Where do you know this obligation from? Achrei Hashem alekeichem teilechu. You have to follow after the Rebbeinu Shalom. Now there's something missing. You're telling me to follow the Sefer Torah? I can understand that. What's the source of the obligation? Achrei Hashem alekeichem teilechu. Where do you see Sefer Torah? The answer is Torah and the Rebbeinu Shalom is one and the same. Yisrael v'yaraisa v'kuchabichu chadu. So we have to see in the Sefer Torah Kavod Hashem. You look in the Reishis Chachman, Shar Yira, Perik Tezvav, he says the Shem HaNichbad includes the Torah HaKadoshah, because Kavod is personified by Torah. So therefore we're talking about Kavod HaTorah, standing up for the Sefer Torah. It's Pashit, as the Pesachei Tshuva says in Sif Katan Beis of our Simmer Reish Pei Beis, even if you're learning. But if they're moving a Sefer Torah, you have to stand up for the Sefer Torah. It's noteworthy that the Rambam concludes this statement, and then he adds, the Mishnah says, Kol ha'machalas ha'Torah, gufay mechol al habriyas. V'chol ha'machaberes ha'Torah, that's the Mishnah Navos, gufay mechuber al habriyas. Now this is frightening, because when the Mishnah says, Kol ha'machalas ha'Torah, gufay mechol al habriyas, that's very real. If we're not careful, it's a terrible sakana. I always say that there's a Chavetz Chaim, the Bialacha actually, there's an unprecedented writing that he enters in the Bialacha, the end of Siman Pei Gimel. To my knowledge, that it's unparalleled in all of his writings. He writes a story about himself. Generally, he's no me in the Sefer, but here he writes a story. I was very upset. There was a Kali Adas, who obviously was a Talmud Chacham because he had a lot of Svarim. But, pardon me, he had a party in the room where he learned, and there was a bad reyach emanating from that party. And I told him, you can't leave Svarim in the same room with this waste. But he ignored me, and I said about him, Kidvar Hashem Baza, and he got his deserved oynish. His son went off the derech, and everybody saw Kol ha'machalas ha'Torah gufay mechul al habriyas. That's the Bialacha in the end of Pei Gimel. The gentlest of all souls, Chavetz Chaim, writes such a story, and he gave him a warning, and as if you deserved it. I guess Chavetz Chaim felt the sensitivity in a lack of Kavod HaTorah, and he couldn't tolerate it. And he made a point of writing about it for posterity, that we have to be careful with Kavod HaTorah. But let's be more positive, the Midah Tova, the other part of the Mishnah. Kol ha'machaberes ha'Torah, the schar is unimaginable. It is well known that Rashi's father was Zoich to have a son like Rashi, because as I heard this once from the Kloiser Rebbe, he swept in front of the Aron Kodesh with his long beard. Rabbi Yochanan brings this also in the Shmuzin. He would take his long beard and sweep the Aron HaKodesh, an incredible display of kavod. Kol ha'makayim mechaberes ha'Torah, gufay mechubed al habriyas. I saw this by my Rebbeim, all of my Rebbeim, a tremendous dedication and devotion to Kavod HaTorah. How they wouldn't sit down during the Akafas because there was Sefer Torah around. They wouldn't turn their backs to the Sefer Torah. They would follow the Sefer Torah by Psicha, by Yitzhak and Achnosa. I guess one story tells it all. Rapam said he once was with Rabbi Shlomo Hyman, the great Rabbi Shlomo Hyman, and the Bach was holding a Sefer like, you hold a suitcase, but in his hand, and it was like leaning downwards. So Shlomo says, "Nein." He took the sefer. Nita zoi trokt ben sefer. So he held the sefer to his heart. He said, "Azoi trokt ben." That's the way you hold it. Holding the sefer Torah, holding the sefer to his heart, and that was a sefer. That was a rashba. But regarding sefer Torah, how much more so? And indeed, the Shulchan Aruch and Siv Gimel, you should carry a sefer Torah keneged liboy. Interesting shayla, the Minchas Yitzchak and Chelik Beis Kuf Yudzayin was asked about what was very typical in the old Beis HaKnesses, the old shuls. They had behind the bima where you sat down when you did Hagbah, and on both sides of that they had holders where you kept the sefer Torah. If you had 2 or 3 sefer Torah, you put the sefer Torah in a holder. So Rav Moshe and others have chus about this. The Minchas Yitzchak has an objection because in Reish Pei Beis Siv Zayin you can't sit on the same level with the sefer Torah. So if you have the sefer Torah in those holders, that's adjacent to the sitter. So look at the sensitivity. Sefer Torah has to have unusual respect. Remember one of my great Rebbeim, Rabbi Yakov Zev, he had a heart attack. So we made a minyan in his house, and one of the Baruchim asked the Rebbe, said, "No, how was it?" So she said, with great tmimus, "I couldn't sleep a whole night. I had a Sefer Torah in my house. So I jumped up and I kissed the Sefer Torah, but then I did it again. How could I sleep? There's a Sefer Torah in my house." So obviously it's not only the Talmidei Chacham, but even the Neshei Talmidei Chachamim. Kol mechaber es haTorah gufa mechuber ala briyos. But now to apply this more lemaisa, the Shulchan Aruch, as we mentioned, you're not allowed to turn your back to the Sefer Torah. And again, you're wondering, who would dare do that? So let's discuss a few common shaylas. You're standing during Maftir, Haftarah, the Sefer Torah is behind you, your back is towards the Sefer Torah. During Akafis, your back is to the Sefer Torah. Sometimes during Arachos, the Sefer Torah. Or during, when the Rav speaks, he speaks from the front of the shul, his back's to the Aron HaKodesh. So we have to learn this sugya properly. The Gemara in Yuma Daf Nun Gimel says, Kehanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, when they would step back from an avodah, they wouldn't turn their back, turn around and walk with their back facing the Heichel. They would back out. Instead of turning around and walking your back towards the Heichel, they would back out like you back out from an Adam Gadol. That's the Gemara in Yuma. Then the Gemara adds, the same is true. A Talmud, when he leaves his Rebbe, should not turn around and walk out. He should back out and keep his back facing outwards. And this is an halacha in Yeridei Reish Mem Beis Tezayin. You go visit a Rebbe, a Rav, a Rebbe. You walk out, you don't turn around and walk out, you back out. And in one of the Gedolei Olam, when you came to his office, he had a lock, and he would have to buzz you in to get into his office. When you left, you couldn't get out unless he buzzed you out. And if you turned around and walked out, he would not buzz you out. He was mechanach, his talmidim. You walk out from Rebbe, you walk out backwards. Lav kol adam zoicha, not everybody has such a Rebbe, we have to learn on our own. When you go visit, or go to speak to an Adam Gadol, you finish talking, you back out, you don't turn your back towards the Gadol. That's all Hilchas Kavod Rabbi. The Shulchan Aruch is saying the same applies to a Sefer Torah. Don't stand with your back towards the Sefer Torah. Where did Mechaber get this from? Zok the Goyin, the Gemara in Yuma. Oh, but what's the logic? For us, it's beautiful. If you can't do that to a Talmid Chacham, mipanei lo kolshkein, it's a kal v'choima. And that's taka why the Pri Megadim holds B'zoyin Sefer Torah is a deraisa. If by a Rebbe you can't walk out and turn your back, kal v'choima to a Sefer Torah. You probably recall the Mishnah in Sukkot, Afnan Aleph Beis, speaking about Yidden would say, our avos that were over the avodah zara, they were rebellious. They would be in the mikdash. Achareim el heichel. Their backs was to the heichel. That was the symbol of rebellion. You turn your back to the Heichel, that's disrespect. So obviously, Midah Tova, we show respect, we don't turn our back to the Sefer Torah. So a good example would be, again, those that have these makeshift minyanim today, there's no Aron HaKodesh, you keep a Sefer Torah on the table. That's a problem, because then someone's with their back towards the Sefer Torah. It's Negei Aleichem in a base Ovel. You have to be careful where you put the Sefer Torah. If the Sefer Torah is on a table, and someone's back's to the Sefer Torah, that's a violation of this Issa, like the Prima Gordon's Issa Deraisa. I saw a story, the Stipler once came to Nichma Avelim, and of course they gave him a very nice chair to sit down, and he started schlepping the chair, moving it to its location. So they asked him, what's going on? He says, Pashut, you gave me a place to sit, very nice, but then my back would be towards Sefer Torah. There was a Sefer Torah obviously on the table nearby. I don't want to sit my back to the Sefer Torah. No, Rabbi said that's a simple halacha. So you have a Sefer Torah today. If anybody has minyanim, they have a Sefer Torah, you have to know Hilchais Kavod Sefer Torah. Keep it in the right place. Agav, someone asked me, could I bring the Sefer Torah to my house? Do you have to lay in 3 times? What's the story about transporting a Sefer Torah? So this is another sugya we spoke about in the past. The Makar is Yushalmi, it's the end of Simon Kuf Lamed Hey and Archayim. But Linyonenu, the Emek Bracha and Amid Mem Gimel points out that the source of the Issa of transporting a Sefer Torah is our halacha. Because one of the things the Mechaber says is Miyachod Lei Mokim. You have to have a special place to keep the Sefer Torah. In other words, keep it in shul. Don't deliver it to your house. Don't make the Sefer Torah make house calls. And that's why there's one gave a whole share about this, about transporting a Sefer Torah. And this is based on the Ramah, the end of Kuf Lamed Hey. Now the emes is that the Ramah does stipulate, if you bring it in advance of laning, let's say the laning on Monday, you bring it Sunday, then it's mutter. The avla is you don't deliver a Sefer Torah for laning. Bring it and take it back. That shows that the Sefer Torah is being delivered. You bring it a day in advance, keep it, and then there's time for laning. The Das Torah in the end of Kuf Lamed Hey says even more so. If you bring it right before laning and you put it on the table, that's disrespectful. If you have a special place to keep the Sefer Torah, you have a little portable Aron HaKodesh, and you bring it in the Aron HaKodesh, it's even mutter right before laning. So if you noticed, the real focus is Kavod Sefer Torah. It's not, the Welt says you have to have 3 times laning. The Aruch HaShulchan mentions that. But Reb Shlomo Zalman, Alich HaShlem, Yud Beis, Lamed Ches, and many others say it's lav dafka 3 times. As long as the Sefer Torah is being transported ba'ofen kavod, that's enough. The point is you bring it for laning and bring it back, that means the Sefer Torah is being delivered. You could deliver a pizza, but you don't deliver a Sefer Torah, pardon me. But if you have a special place and you keep it there overnight, so it's temporary location, and that's the answer to the question people ask, can I bring it to my minyan I have outdoors? You have to find a place to keep it. A mechabadik place. And Taka, one of the many, many things that Misaskim do so wonderfully, when they bring a Sefer Torah to a Beis Avel, they bring it in Aron HaKodesh. Now that itself is the heter. And indeed, you don't have to have laning 3 times. So just Eitz HaTov, if you want to bring a Sefer Torah to your house at any time, either learn Hilchas Sefer Torah, or minimally ask directions from an Adam Gadol. What seems to be another example of our sugya is the Mishnah Berurah in the end of Kuf Mem Zayin. He says when you're holding by the Haftarah, so typically the one that got Hagba is sitting behind the bima, holding the Sefer Torah. You, whether you are the Bal Maftir or you're the Bal Koira that's laying the Haftarah, be careful, don't stand with your back to the Sefer Torah. Now this is a perfect example of our sugya. Don't forget, the Sefer Torah is being held by someone behind the bima. You're standing by the bima. You're turning it back to the Sefer Torah. Now this is a chiddush to me. He doesn't mention any makar as typically he does in Sharat Tzion, but this is actually the Pri Megadim in the end of Kuf Mem Aleph and Mishpatei Zahav. So it's a little of a tzarachian to me why he doesn't mention the original source. But we see this halacha. I should mention this Nagaya every Shabbos. Especially when you have 2 or 3 Sifrei Torah, there starts to be a little congestion behind you. 3 Sifrei Torah. You got to be careful whether you're the Baal Maftir or the Baal Koira that lanes or reads the Haftarah. Don't stand with your back to any Sefer Torah. Rapam would always tell us, when you finish Hagba, so you want to move to the side, that's a good idea, but don't stand up and walk to the side, because then the Sefer Torah is being transported, the Olam has to stand. And typically the Olam will not stand, so you're being machshud Olam in not standing for Sefer Torah. So he would say, in your seat or on the bench, slide over to the side without standing up, so therefore you avoid the issue and you don't have to make people stand up. Now, what to me was a chiddush, Reb Shlomo Zalman Aleich Shleima Yud Beis Yud Daled, he says it's mutter to stand with your, by the Baal Koira, or the Baal Maftir is mutter, to stand with their back to the Sefer Torah. I, the Mishtabura, is makbid. I didn't see any gadol being makbid. Takes a very strong stance. What's the svara? Because you, the Baal Koira, or the Baal Maftir, you're in your place. You belong there. That's your position. The Sefer Torah has sort of, I wouldn't say invaded, but has encroached on your domain. Now he's not saying I was there first, too bad on you. He's saying in Havana, if I'm where I'm supposed to be, that's not perceived as a lack of kavod. The Emek Bracha in Amud Mem Gimel, he doesn't bring the Mishtabura, but he says, I think that when you are standing with your back to the Sefer Torah, al kavod HaTorah, it's not a bezoyin HaTorah. So he says that if Lamaisa, you're holding a Sefer Torah, and there's a Sefer Torah behind you, so your back's to the Sefer Torah, there's no problem, which is very negay when you have 2 Sefer Torah on Haitzah V'Achnasa, because you're holding a Sefer Torah, it's not a problem. But then he adds a bigger chiddush. If you are the Baal Maftir or the Baal Koira, and your back is to the Sefer Torah, it's not a problem, because you are doing a mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah, Kriyas Meftarah, or you're getting the Maftir. So it's not perceived as a lack of kavod if you're doing a mitzvah. And he brings a raya, and Sait Daf Mem Amud Beis, we'll soon see in detail, the Kehanim are allowed to turn their back to the Arayin when they duchen. No, same should be true regarding the Haftarah. And then he writes something interesting. He says the Sfardim do it really good. They have the entrance to go up to the bima, to the platform, right behind the bima. So it's not even shaykh to sit behind the bima, because that's the steps up. So the people that hold the Sefer Torah have to be on the sides. And he says, I wish the Ashkenazim would do that. Keep the back of the bima vacant. In other words, he does understand that it's better to show more kavod, but he says it's not a violation of the Yissa if you're standing with your back towards the Sefer Torah. Now the emes is, there's a big kasha on this whole svar, because I understand that laning Haftarah is kavod HaTorah. But who told you that kavod HaTorah justifies bezoyin HaTorah? This is a notch higher of a problem. By standing your back to the Sefer Torah, that would be a bezoyin. Who said, if I'm being Isaac and kavod, that justifies bezoyin? But I guess the Shlomo Zalman and the Emek Bracha understood that since it's a form of kavod, it's not perceived as bezoyin. Now, Lamais, if you ask me, even Rabbi Shlomo Zalman didn't say it's something wrong to be mnizer. So it's valid, it's kedai, if you're the Baal Koira or the Baal Maftir, to move slightly your back, should not be behind, not be in front of the Sefer Torah. And even if there's 2 or 3 Sefer Torah, the only thing I would mention is that whenever there's 2 or 3 Sefer Torah, l'mashal during a kafis, I'm holding a Sefer Torah, and behind me there's another Sefer Torah. Is that a problem? My back's to the Sefer Torah. So this is a Sefer Chassidim and Taf Saf Kuf Lamed in a different context. But he says if you have a Sefer Torah in your hand, he's talking about a chumash actually, you have no chiyuv to mechabed another chumash, because you're also among the ummah, so to speak. And I saw the Kinyan Torah in Hey Tezayin and the Beis Baruch in the Chelik Beis Amud Shin Tzadik Zayin both say that if you did Hagbah on the first Sefer Torah and you're sitting, now they do Hagbah on the second Sefer Torah, even though everybody else has to stand up for the Sefer Torah, you don't have to. Because you are involved in cover of the first, that's your job, that's your mission, stay seated and be mechaber the first Sefer Torah. So generally when you have a procession of 2-3 Sefer Torah or during a kafis, your back is to the Sefer Torah behind you, it's a problem. The answer is not a problem. If you have a Sefer Torah, then your covered is your Sefer Torah. What is much more of an issue when they're bringing the Sefer Torah from the Aron to the Bima, and you want to go kiss the Sefer Torah, I guess, in better times. So people typically go with the Sefer Torah, they kiss the Sefer Torah, they turn around and they walk away. That's no good. You can't turn your back to the Sefer Torah. Now, you want to make room for someone else, that's very nice. So either back away, without turning your back, or turn to the side. But don't turn your back and walk away from the Sefer Torah, because then you're violating this Issa. Now maybe if there's someone in between, so it's not such a problem. I'm not saying a person's a mechitza, but maybe if someone's in between, so you're not turning it back to the Sefer Torah proper. Regarding hakafos, believe it or not, there is a number of issues regarding Kavod Sefer Torah. First of all, when the Sefer Torah being danced with, how are you allowed to sit in the Beis Medrash? The Sefer Torah shalai b'mekaymai. And the emes is there are many people that will not sit down in the same Beis Medrash where the hakafos are being held, because Sefer Torah around. The Chazon Ish is quoted in Orches Ish. He obviously couldn't stand that long. He would be given a Sefer Torah. He would sit down, and that would justify sitting in the Beis Medrash, because he's holding his own Sefer Torah. Now, if you can hold the Sefer Torah, so better would be if you could sit in an adjacent room, a side room, whatever, as long as in a different room. The Welt is Mekel, and apparently, since the Sefer Torah is out for Kavod Torah, and we're all sitting, resting to get more Kavod Torah, so again, my Rebbeim were very makbid, so I find it hard to sit in the same besmej with Sefer Torah. But the Welt is Mekel, there must be a justification. Regarding an Achnasa Sefer Torah, also, they bring out the other Sefer Torah, you have to be careful. Now generally that's a little easier, the Sefer Torah in one line, but don't kiss the Sefer Torah and walk back out, turn your back to it, use seichel and be careful. Now, I did see the Migdash Ma'at in Reish Pei Beis Gimel. He says, how do you dance by hakafos? I'm dancing, and right behind me ends up a Sefer Torah. My back is to the Sefer Torah. Forget about sitting. How do I dance? Things are moving very quickly, and occasionally there's a Sefer Torah right behind me. How could I continue dancing? My back is to the Sefer Torah. So of course, if you know the Sefer Torah is behind you, turn around and dance in front of the Sefer Torah. That's the best eitzah. But, a person could get nervous. The whole kafas, he's busy looking if there's something behind him. So the Migdash Ma'at says, if you're involved in Kavod Torah, you don't have to worry about your back to the Sefer Torah. I saw the Abnei Yoshvi and Gimel Memches Gimel also says during a kafas, just be focused on Kavod Torah. If your back momentarily is behind, is in front of a Sefer Torah, don't worry. And it brings an interesting raya. Mechaber says at two places, in Kuf Mem Zayin and in Reish Pei Beis Dalid, that you're not allowed to touch the Sefer Torah. So you're very careful. But if you're touching it, l'tzoyrech kavod Sefer Torah, to misakin it, to fix it, it's mutter. So he says maybe a kafis is considered tzoyrech Sefer Torah, and you're allowed to turn your back towards the Sefer Torah. Someone asked me an interesting question. He was given hoitzah v'achnasa, and the Chazan is bringing the Sefer Torah back to the Aron, and he wants to run ahead, so to speak, and open the Sefer Torah to minimize in Tircha de Tzibura. Also, it's respectful, you bring the Sefer Torah to an open Aron. But then he has to walk in front of the Sefer Torah. His back is to the Sefer Torah. So then I could also hear that that's covered for the Sefer Torah. He's trying to focus on Kavod HaTzibur, Tircha de Tzibura, Kavod HaTorah. Of course, if he could walk on the side, that's better, but even if he's walking directly in front of the Sefer Torah, that's a form of cover, that's mutter. It's noteworthy, the Magen Avraham and Taf Reish Samach in the beginning, he says when you make hakafas during the days of Sukkot, Shana Rab with the Dalet Minim, he says the Chazan really should go to his right side because you go to Yamin. But as the Machzah Shekel says, then he's going to have to turn his back to the Aron HaKodesh, and that's no good. So even during the hakafas of the days of Sukkot with the Dalet Minim, we're focused on this halach. Now, consider the next question. I wish we could be back in stone. I could show you exactly what I'm talking about. But in some shuls, there are seats in between the bima and the Aron HaKodesh. Again, Stone Beis Medrash, our wonderful Achsanya, is a good example. There are a row of seats in between the bima and the Aron HaKodesh. In the yeshiva where I give a share, many yeshivas, that's the way it is. The bima is in the middle, and there are rows or standards in between the bima and the Aron HaKodesh. So here we come to an interesting question. Because now, you're either sitting with your back towards the bima, the Sefer Torah is on the bima. So you're going to turn your back towards the bima, towards the Aron HaKodesh, is also a problem. So if you're in between the bima, which has a Sefer Torah during laning, and the Aron HaKodesh, you're in double trouble. Which way do you turn? So here we come to another important part of this sugya. The Mechaba adds, you shouldn't turn your back to the Sefer Torah. El im ken gavoya mimenu asar tvachim. Unless the Sefer Torah is 10 tvachim high. The source of this l'chayra, as the Chayei Adam in Nishmas Adam Gimel, the Karen David, Simel Amavav point out, is Yishalmi and Brachas Gimel Hey. A person in a room with Ishvi Ishtai is only mutter to have a Sefer Torah there if the Yishalmi says Gavoya Asara Tvachim. If the Sefer Torah is high 10 Tvachim, then evidently it's a Reshus B'fnei Atzmai, and then it's mutter. So apparently, even though the Sefer Torah being in the room is a problem, but if it's elevated 10 tvachim high, it's no longer a problem. Evidently, 10 tvachim, approximately 40 inches, 35 to 40 inches, is the Reshus B'fnei Atzmai. And that justifies a heta. The Goyin in Biagra has a different source in Brachas Chavav. I always thought that I found the Karen David says this. The Gemara in Brachas Chafei, the Shulchan Aruch Ayin Tes Beis quotes this. If there's waste in a room, you can't learn or daven. But let's say it's high 10 tvachim and there's no reach ra, then you could learn or daven. Because something 10 tvachim high is in its own rishus. But be that as it may, we see from the Gemara, from the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, if the Sefer Torah is 10 tvachim high, you're allowed to turn your back to it. Oh, now, Oy Bazoi, the Sefer Torah is on a bima that's 10 tvachim high, or more so in an Aron Kodesh 10 tvachim high, there shouldn't be a problem. Now, I must mention, I measured a few tables. Standard tables are not 10 tvachim high. Approximately 30 plus inches, but at least on a bima that's high, 10 tvachim, 40 inches, 3.5 feet, or an Aron Kodesh shouldn't be a problem. But here we see, as we always see, how a word of a rishon is important. Let's revisit the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Rambam. Lo ya'azah choyrev, don't turn your back. Elim ken gavoya mimenu asara tvachim. Says the Chavos Yair in the Tshuva Kuf Pei Dalid. The Rambam says gavoya mimenu, which means it has to be 10 tvachim above your height. Not 10 tvachim from the ground, 10 tvachim higher than you. Maybe on a colossal aron that's very high up in the wall. No. But if it's on a bima, it's not higher than you. And he says this emphatically, the lashon of gavoya mimenu implies 10 tvachim above your height, which obviously torpedoes the whole heta. But the emes is, I must say, it's hard to accept this. Iboy yisei mikra, iboy yisei misvar. First of all, the Rambam in the Tshuvas Perador Siman Ayin Ches was asked, what's the het that the Duchen, the Kahanim turned their back to the Sefer, to the Aron HaKodesh? And the truth is, in Eretz Yisrael, when they Duchen on Yom Kippur, by Nila, the Aron HaKodesh is open, in fact. So the Rambam says, it's not a problem. Im hayu asvarim gevayim min ha'aretz asara tvachim, chilku kavod la'atzmai. And therefore there's no issa. The Rambam is saying, if the Sefer Torah is higher than 10 tvachim above the ground, it's mutter. Not 10 tvachim higher than the person. So I saw the Shura Shai in Siman Tov Samaches, talks about this Shaila, a person who has a seat in the front, and we'll soon see the details, but he says, the Chavas Yo'er says 10 tvachim higher than the person. He did not see the Rambam. The Rambam in Perador says high 10 tvachim from the ground. The Karen LaDavid, in that same Tshuva Lamed Vav, says Mamanashach. If the heta is 10 tvachim is Rishus B'fnei Atzmai, why does it have to be above your head? And if you don't like 10 tvachim as Rishus B'fnei Atzmai, so where do you get to share 10 tvachim above your head? But then he adds that I found really beautiful. Since the makar of this heta of 10 tvachim is the Yishalmi says clearly, if the Sefer Torah is 10 tvachim from the ground. So you don't have to come to a Rambam, it's the Yishalmi. The Chayodam that I mentioned also takes exception to this Chavas Yoyer. So I think we're comfortable to say, if the Sefer Torah is above 10 tvachim from the ground, it's mutter to stand with your back towards the Sefer Torah. It's sort of its own embassy, and it justifies what you're doing. Now, again, to apply this Lamaisa, most tables, to my knowledge, are not 10 tvachim high. Also, when a person is walking with the Sefer Torah, carrying it during a kafis or during psicha, it's also not 10 tvachim from the ground, especially the bottom of the Sefer Torah. Or when someone's sitting after Hagba, it's certainly not 10 tvachim above the ground. So that's why it's a problem. But, and to apply this Mola Maisa, when the Kahanim Duchin, so typically the Sefer Torah in a bima, in the Amara, in the Aron HaKodesh. So this is why the minig could be that you're allowed to turn, the Kahanim could turn their backs to the Aron HaKodesh, because presumably the Sefer Torah are 10 tvachim above the ground. Now the emes, there seems to be more to this. Because the Gemara in Soita Daf Mem says you have to cherish Kavod Tzibur, because when the Kahanim Duchin, they have to face the Tzibur, although Achireim Klape Shchina, this is Lashon Gemara, they turn their backs to the Aron HaKodesh because of Kavod Tzibur. It seems that there's a special heta by Duchening to turn your back to the Aron HaKodesh. Actually, Soita Lamed Ches, Koi Savarchu, says the Gemara, Panim Keneget Panim. Ka'eldam ha'ayim lechaveiroi. So it seems Duchening has to be your face to Yoilam. No, that means you're turning it back to the Aron HaKodesh. And that's why the Aruch HaShulchan, we'll soon see the details, in Yeridei Reish Pei Beis, he says a Rav that darshans is allowed to stand in the front of the shul, even though his back is to the Aron HaKodesh. Just like Kehanim Duchin, they do the same. So I saw his son, the Torah Temima, in Nasei Ois Kufla Metes. So that's the source of the minig. He doesn't quote his father, but he quotes the Duchening. That Duchening, we see, Kavod Tzibur, allows you to turn your back to the Aron HaKodesh. Now, Ila Didi, the Chayda Rai is not a Raya. Of course you have to face the Tzibur. So do like many shuls do. Kehanim spread out the length of the Mizrach Vant, but there's no one standing directly in front of the Aron HaKodesh. So you could do both. You could face the Tzibur, and if need be, you could double up Kehanim, but avoid standing in front of the Makam Aron HaKodesh. And it's noteworthy, the Torah Mima, he says the Rambam Perador is Mekel, Tzarachi and Gadol, he says. I don't understand. How could you stand? How could you be machmer only of 10 tefachim, like the Rambam says? It's a fair pasuk. You're allowed to face the Yoilam. So that's why the Rambam required 10 Tvachim. For duchening, it's mutal the pasuk. Now, you can't leave a tzarach and go on the Rambam. I think Teretz is pasuk. Of course, you have to face the Yoilam. Spread out and stand throughout the length of the Mizrach without turning it back to the Aron HaKodesh. But the Maisa, the Minig Oilam is the canon face the Tzibur, and some are still makbid, they will not stand directly in front of the Aron HaKodesh. But La'alacha, since the Sifrei Torah are higher than 10 Tfachim from the ground, if need be, the Kohen could turn his back to the Aron HaKodesh, again, since it's a Rishus B'fnei Atzmi. As far as the Rav saying a drasha with his back to the Aron HaKodesh, so we have enough information to deal with that question. First of all, it's in the Aron HaKodesh, which is a Rishus B'fnei Atzmai. Also, he's doing it out Kavod HaTorah, not B'zayin HaTorah. The Aruch HaShulchan compares this to duchening. And indeed, the Taz in Yeredeya, Reish Pei Beis Aleph, discusses this very question, and he says, Kivan Sefer Torah munechas b'Aron HaKodesh, Habi K'moi Rishus Acheres. Now, if you read a Lashon carefully, he does not say an Aron Kodesh is big, huge, and therefore Rishus B'Fnei Atzmai. He says, since it's an Aron, it's K'moi Rishus Acheres. So both the Shura Shai that I mentioned and the Das Kedoshim, Yeredeya, Reish Pei Beis Beis, both say apparently it's not a very high, big Aron HaKodesh. But the Aron Kodesh is a separate Rishus by itself. Okay, the Maisa, the Rambam, says you have to have 10 Tfachim. But I think it's really not so negeya, because Lamaisa, the Aron HaKodesh, typically, the Sefer Torah are definitely 10 Tfachim above the ground. I should also mention that the Aruch HaShulchan, after he says the heta of darshaning with your back to the Aron HaKodesh, he says also, that's Kavod HaTorah. The Rav is darshaning Kavod HaTorah, Shmiras HaTorah, that's a justification. I saw a very interesting tshuva. The Talmud of the Noid Yehuda, the Tshuva Meyahava, in Beis Reish Chav Ches, he writes a little sarcastically, I was asked by one of the Geyim HaMakanoyim, one of the Kanoyim Min HaMesyorim Al Darshanim, and who was very critical of me, because I stand with my back to the Aron HaKodesh. And he targeted me specifically because Yom Kippur, when I want to darshan, I get the Olam very involved, I open the Aron HaKodesh, and then I stand my back towards the Aron HaKodesh. So this critic, this Kanoi, was really out of control. What's my heta? So he writes, like, again, a little sarcastically, first of all, I'm darshaning Kavod HaTorah. So it's not a violation of this Issa. The Issa of turning your back is when there's an insensitive gesture. You're walking away, you turn your back. Also, he says, he was a Shel Shalom Midas Rambam. He doesn't know the Rambam. The Rambam says, if it's high 10 Tvachim, it's mutter. The Sefer Torah that I turn my back to was high 10 Tvachim above the ground. So this Kanoi was a Shel Shalom Midas of a Ferish Rambam. Then he says, it's not worse than the Siyas Kapayim, that's mutter. And then he says, by the way, Reb Kanoi, you probably didn't notice, but everybody else notices, it's common knowledge that I stand on the side. I am not directly in front of the Aron HaKodesh, because I want to be machma, even though it's mutter. So this is typical of a misplaced Kanois, doesn't know halacha, and doesn't know the facts. But what's interesting is that the Tshuva Mehava, even though he holds his mutter, he himself was makbid. I guess there's no share of Kol Mechabed Es HaTorah. The Shar Ephraim in Shar Gimel, and Pischei Sha'arim, Sivka and Vav, also says it's mutal halacha for the Rav to turn his back to the Aron HaKodesh, but he says that's only a Rav that's darshan Hashem Shemayim. And as he writes it, but a Rav, or a person that's speaking, not a Rav, but a speaker, and his motivation is droish v'kabel schar, okay, the play on words, he's getting paid for it, or he's stam talking, but it's not l'shem shemayim for Kavod HaTorah. He gets ein loy toich v'yesh lo yacharayim el ha'heichal Hashem, and you better be careful. So in other words, you have to be darshaning divrei Torah l'shem shemayim. He does advise when you're making Aron HaKodesh to make it elevated. So even if you're standing with your back towards the Aron HaKodesh, it's never parallel to the actual Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah are much higher than the person himself. Now the Bnei Yoina in Reish Peivav Beis under the Askadoshim also is critical of people that are talking stam things. Now this could be Negeya. A Rav, the Minig Yisrael, the Rav stands with his back towards the Aron HaKodesh. But let's say the president has to make announcements about the shul, or invite a politician to come and speak. Now, I don't think it's right to have a politician speaking in shul, but besides that, what's the head of a politician for his own agenda to speak with his back to the Aron HaKodesh? And Taka, that's what the poskim that I mentioned, what they meant is, if you're talking Torah is one thing, but you can't abuse the heter of speaking from the front of the shul, anything goes. It has to be a divrei Torah l'shem shemayim. The Migdash Ma'at there also says, I am careful, I turn my back not to the Aron HaKodesh, I turn it sideways. My back should not be to the Aron HaKodesh. Now I've seen my Rebbeim also, they stood in the front. Either they would they would move the stenda, that it's not directly in front of the Aron HaKodesh, or minimally they would kiss the paroiches of the Aron HaKodesh before and after, to show I didn't forget you, I'm doing this because this is what has to be done. The Chalkas Yaakov and Yardei Kuf Lamed, as the Minchas Yitzchak and Hey Ayin Ches discuss, the minig then was that if a mitzvah boy got up, made his pshatel in the shul. He have a boy all 13 years old, darshing with his back towards the Sefer Torah. Is that enough of a heta? And they both say yes. This is his introduction, his orientation into Kavod HaTorah. He says, Al tigu b'mashichai, einay daim hevel piv shal tinoikos. This is going to give him a memory of Kavod HaTorah. And yes, that justifies even a child standing with his back towards the Sefer Torah. What's most pashut, I've seen this and it bothers me, when the Beis is empty, you could have two bachim and one's a wannabe Rosh Yeshiva. So he gets up and he stands where the Rosh Yeshiva stands with his back towards the Aron HaKodesh, and he make believe he's saying a drasha, or he's learning with his chavrusa, with all the gestures as if he's a dream world of being a Rosh Yeshiva. No, that's not a heta. You want to be a Rosh Yeshiva? The best advice is be mechaber es HaTorah. Don't stand with your back towards the Sefer, the Aron HaKodesh. The more covered you show for Torah, the greater you become. And now we come to the last group of questions, which is a fascinating question. You have a seat in between the Bima and the Aron HaKodesh. As we mentioned earlier, you're in a quandary. You turn your back to the Aron HaKodesh, is no good. You turn your back to the Bima when the Sefer Torah is there, what do? So it's noteworthy. The Lavush in the end of Siman Kuf Nun says don't make any seats in between the Bima and the Aron HaKodesh, because you end up turning your back someplace which is no good. And the Magen Avram, Taz, and Mishnah Berurah, the end of Kuf Nun, quote this la'alacha. Okay, so it sounds good, but that means many of our yeshivas and shuls are doing incorrectly. But Rabbi said the Pella is the Tosefta in Megillah Gimel Yud Daled describes how the shul should be organized. And I quote, Sekeinim Yoishvin Pneim Klape Yom, that's the minik in yeshivas Ad HaYom. The Rosh Yeshiva, the Rav, the Rabbanim sit with their face facing the Olam. Now listen to the next words. Pneim Klape Yom, V'achayreim Klape HaKodesh. They sit facing the tzibur, and the back is to the Aron HaKodesh. There's a pella. You know how to do that. The Sefta is recommending putting tzaddikim with their backs to the Aron HaKodesh, and then the Sefta adds, when you're duchin also, you stand with your back towards the Aron HaKodesh. What's going on here? What about the basic halacha? But the plot is thickening. The Ramah, the end of Kuf Nun, quotes this Tosefta and says the Zakeinim sit facing the Olam and the people sit the other direction. He leaves out those words, Achareim al HaKodesh. What's going on here? So the Pashat Pshat is, the Tosefta did not mean you put a Rav with his back towards the Aron HaKodesh. That's disrespectful. He means put it on the side of the Mizrach that's parallel to the Aron HaKodesh, but not directly in front of the Aron HaKodesh. So maybe the Ramah wanted to make it more practical, so he left out those words, and as you put the Rabbanim on the Mizrach, but not your back to the Aron HaKodesh. Or maybe in the times of the Tosefta, they had big Aron HaKodesh that was 10 tefachim above the ground. So you're allowed to sit with your back to the Aron HaKodesh. But maybe today, smaller shuls, they can't do this. That's why the Ramah left it out. Then there's no heter to turn your back towards the Aron HaKodesh. But be that as it may, the minig of your back facing the oilam is an old minig. It's noteworthy the Yam Shashleima in Bava Kama, in the end of Bava Kama, in the Chelukei Dinim between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel, Siman Lamed Vav, he points out that Bnei Bavel, the Rabbanim, sat with their facing the oilam, but in Eretz Yisrael, the Rabbanim face the Aron HaKodesh. What's the difference? So the Chavadas in the Gimel, the end of Siman Yotes says maybe in Bavel they had high Aron HaKodesh, so it wasn't the problem. But in Eretz Yisrael they had small shtiblach, and the Sefer Torah was not 10 tefachim above the ground. They didn't have the liberty of doing that. But be that as it may, to get back to our Shaila, the Taz, Magen Avraham Mishtabur says, don't have a seat in front of the bima. Why? Because it comes out that by laning, you have a back towards the Sefer Torah. Now listen to this. The Taz himself says that that the Rav is allowed to darshan with his back towards the Aron HaKodesh. So Freg the Prima Godim, in the end of Siman Kuf Nun, why did the Taz say you can't have a seat in between the bima and the Aron HaKodesh? Because if you sit with your back towards the Aron HaKodesh, it's violating this Issa. How could that be? The same Taz in Yeridei says you could darshan with your back towards the Aron HaKodesh. So why does the Taz in Orach Chaim say you can't have a seat with your back towards the Aron HaKodesh? So the Prima Godim, a simple teretz. If you're darshaning once in a while, an hour, half hour, an hour, once a week, Shabbos, that's aroi. That's lefi shah. That's okay. But to establish a seat, constantly sitting with your back towards the Aron HaKodesh, that the Taz held is wrong. So therefore, in Kuf Nun, he quotes the Levush, no seats that face towards the Aron HaKodesh. The Levushei Mordechai in Gimel Tezvav says maybe we could say that when your back is to the Aron HaKodesh only temporary, like by a Rav, that's akroi, that's mutataka. But taka to have a seat with your back towards the Aron HaKodesh is wrong. The Chavadas adds, it's also logical, even if it's muta, but why do that? Why not show more kavod? The Rav has no choice, he has to turn his back towards the Aron HaKodesh. But to establish a seat, even if it's 10 tvachim high, why do it on a permanent basis? So to apply this more lamaisa, if you have a seat in front of the bima, so you don't have a problem because you're facing the Aron HaKodesh. But the problem is during laning, your back is towards to the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah is on the bima. So here we come to an extremely important Rashba. The Rashba in Gimel Reish Pei Aleph in the Tshuva is quoted by the Yeridei, the Ramon Yeridei Reish Mem Beis Yud Zayin. The Ramon quotes the Rashba, when the Sefer Torah is on the bima and they do Hagba, you don't have to stand up. More so, as the Taz adds, when the Sefer Torah is on the Shulchan, you don't have to stand up. Now, here I have to tell you a little bit of Metzias. We refer to the bima as the structure that we put the Sefer Torah on during laning. The Rashba, when he referred to bima typically means a platform, an elevated platform that you use for laning, that you put the shulchan on the bima. Shulchan is what we call the bima, but the bima was a platform, like many shuls have an elevated platform. So the Rashba is saying a Maradik Yesod, when they do Hagba, you have to stand up because you're in the same Rishus with the Sefer Torah. But if the Hagbah is done on the platform, which is a Rishus B'fnei Atzmai, so you and me in the Tzibah are not in the same Rishus to Sefer Torah. There's no Chiyuv to stand. More so, if the Shulchan is a Rishus B'fnei Atzmai, and now the Sefer Torah is on the Shulchan, it's also Rishus B'fnei Atzmai. And that's taka why the Pri Megadim, in the end of Kuf Nun, the Mishnah Berurah quotes it, when the Sefer Torah is on a bima, or we call a bima, on this structure that's above 10 tfachim, there's no problem. Because it's a Rishus B'fnei Atzmai. That means, l'chayra, that when you make Hagbah, I don't have to stand up. So the Rashba concludes, but the minig ha'olam is to stand, because obviously it's perceived as in the same location. No one looks at the bima as a different planet. It's all one location. So let's be very clear. The minig Yisrael is we do stand up when they make Hagbah, even if the Sefer Torah is on a platform. But in Yoneinu, when the Sefer Torah is right behind you on a low table, you can't stand with your back towards the Sefer Torah. Many people that have a seat in between the bima and they're in a kodesh, by laning, they will turn around and they will face the bima because they don't want to turn their back to Sefer Torah. You'll say, wait a minute, what about turning your back towards the Arna Kodesh? So I'll tell you, shtei tshuvas b'dava. First of all, the Arna Kodesh typically is Rishus B'fnei Atzmai. Also, listen to this chap, regarding the Arna Kodesh now is Aroi. So it's more respectful to turn your face towards the Sefer Torah that's out. Ignore the Sefer Torah in the bima, in the Arna Kodesh, because that's in a separate Rishus. And many people that have this seat in between, they will turn themselves around and face the Sefer Torah. What's really the best thing is, if you could do it, stand sideways. So your back is neither to the Sefer Torah or to the Arna Kodesh. But again, if the Sefer Torah is on a low table, then there's no heta. If it's not 10 tfachim, there's no heta to stand facing the Aron if your back is to the Sefer Torah on that low bima. The Mishnah Berurah quote, and the B'shar Tzion, but this is actually a Taz in Reish Mem Beis Sif Kat Yud Gimel, that the halacha when the Arna Kodesh is open, mashal during davening when they open the Arna Kodesh, there's no chiyuv to stand. The Sefer Torahs are visible, but it's the Rishus B'fnei Atzmai. But certainly we understand that when they say Bayi B'Shalom and you turn your back to the Arna Kodesh, that's temporary, and the Arna Kodesh is Rishus B'fnei Atzmai and is mutter. Just to review what we learned today, Be'ez Hashem, there's an unusual Chiyuv Kavod HaTorah, that's the Eid L'chol Bayi Olam. We have to see the Rebbeinu Shel Olam in the Torah. A Talmud Chacham, we have to show Kavod, certainly Torah, but your halachas. You don't turn your back to the Sefer Torah. You walk away from the Sefer Torah with your back not facing the Sefer Torah. You bring a Sefer Torah to a house, you don't need 3 times to lane, as long as it's done ba'oif and Kavod. Be careful if you have a Sefer Torah in your house, don't dress or diaper a child. After laning, try to avoid standing with your back towards the Sefer Torah that was being held after Hagbah, or 2 or 3 Sefer Torah, yesh mekilim, but try to avoid standing with your back towards the Sefer Torah. When you go away from the Sefer Torah after kissing the Sefer Torah, don't turn backwards, but back up. During a kafis, try not to sit or try not to put your back towards the Sefer Torah, but the velt is mekel. The heta of 10 tfachim from the ground is a viable option. If it's on a table, which is not 10 tfachim, there's no heta. If it's being held by someone, there's no heta. But if it's on a high bima, 10 tfachim above the ground is mutter. Duchening, kahanim technically could stand with their back towards the Arna Kodesh, but they're generally nizah not to turn your back towards the Arna Kodesh. The drasha is mutter with your back to the Sefer Torah. Many are machmir to move slightly to the sides. Announcements, politicians speaking is a problem. Bar mitzvah is not a problem. If your seat is in front of the bima, and there's a low bima, do not stand with your back towards the Sefer Torah. And as we said, an open Arna Kodesh does not require us to stand. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful week.